Welcome back. We have Julie Schooling joining us on the show. She's returning to the show. She's a landscape architect out of Thompson Rivers University. Great to have you on.
Thank you.
Julie's been very busy doing a study on the trees at MacArthur Island. We have some beautiful trees there, but you've been doing a study on stem flow, which is sort of deciphering how much water that falls on the trees stays with the tree.
Well, essentially, yeah, you're on
Close.
the mark. It's funneling. How much of the rainwater on a particular canopy gets funneled to the base of the tree? So at that point, it becomes either water that can infiltrate and be irrigation for the roots of the tree, or depending on the situation, that water could also become a hazard and flow over land and become part of the stormwater problem.
So how are the trees at MacArthur Island?
So the trees we looked at MacArthur Island were special compared to a lot of the studies that have been done in forested situations, because they were all isolated. There was sort of, we set a cone of influence that we decided had to be clear in this study. And that meant that really these trees weren't influenced by other canopies or buildings. They were just doing their own thing. And we ended up finding that a lot more water made it down to the base of certain trees than in a forested situation, and also compared to other trees of different sizes and species.
So here we are looking at a couple of different trees, the American beech and the columnar English oak.
Yes, and in our last interview, we did introduce the American beech because already at that point in the study, it was showing itself as a really high producer. So our goal was to try and understand why, which canopy traits were sort of associated with this high production. And I'll just give you an example of a couple that were quite confirming for what other researchers have found. Smooth bark. These trees tend to start with quite a lot less rainfall depth than older, gnarlier, rougher trees. You can imagine it almost like a sponge soaking up. So those trees are acting as interceptors. This one only took about 1 millimeter of rain before it started producing, despite being a very large, dense tree. The other thing in both of those trees that we looked at initially was high branching angles. So that also makes a lot of sense. Basically, if you've got a far-reaching horizontal branching tree, that water is largely just going to sit there until it evaporates or it's going to drip down. If you have the higher branching angles, you're going to get more of that funneled to the base.
Okay. We have a few more pictures. Perhaps we'll run those and take a look at them. Here we go.
Sure. So that's the sort of the cone of influence that I was talking about, and we made sure that there was no inclined rainfall hitting those trees that would have hit other canopies. So that was sort of how we chose those trees out at MacArthur Island. We didn't just take every tree. We had this as a determinant.
So what will become, we do have a few more pictures we can show, but what will become of the study? The purpose of it is to now go forward and do what?
Basically, we want to help people make better decisions about which trees to choose, particularly for urban environments. So you asked about MacArthur Island. Most of those trees, except for 1 or 2, were really in a grassy situation where any excess stem flow could infiltrate into the ground. Not a big problem. However, in a sidewalk situation where you've got the compacted soils, in some cases, that water has nowhere to go but over the curb, into the gutter, and down into our streams. So that was a lot of the motivation for this study was, are we accurately understanding what's happening in our cities to this water? So amount of it, quality of it, we couldn't quite answer in this study, but we know that this stem flow concentrates pollutants and nutrients. So it is water you want to be managing in your urban situation.
Absolutely. We have about a minute left. What else would you like to add?
So this is just food for thought and inspiration and imagination. How can we get that water into the ground and infiltrating? And what's exciting is the mayor mentioned the Lawrence Street project. So that's one of the first projects in Kamloops where they have really pushed for large soil volumes. And that means that the water coming down those trees and the rainwater in general is now able to go in, be irrigation water for the trees, go through a biofiltration process where it's cleaned as it goes, and then infiltrate and start, keep recharging that groundwater instead of becoming part of this overland polluted flow.
Absolutely.
Situation.
Excellent. Excellent.
So the technologies are there.
Yes.
And this is just feeding in to basically say, step it up. We need these. It's a significant quantity.
And the more research we do on this, the better decisions we'll make about the trees and what's below them. Yep. Julie, thank you very much for being here today and sharing that with us.
Thank you for having me.
Excellent. We have a website on the screen if you would like to learn more about that. We are back in 90 seconds with Linda Coles from the Saheli Liquor Store. Stay with us.